This is Lost Time, written by Beryl Coops.
At 6:30 a.m., Brandon's alarm screamed at him, as always. The sound was sharp and insistent, slicing through the quiet of his country cottage near Devon Common like a blade through a dream. He groaned, flinging an arm over his face as if to ward off the inevitable. Another Monday. Another cold floor underfoot. March's chill seeping up from the old tiles to nip at his soles. He shivered, blinking at the grey light that leaked through the curtain edges. He muttered under his breath, remembering, again, that he was out of heating oil. He made a mental note to order some, just like he had the past 3 mornings. But the note would dissolve, as always, into the mess of other thoughts that waited just behind his eyes. Dragging himself into the kitchen, he let the smell of fresh coffee wrap around him like a blanket. The machine had clicked to life half an hour before, programmed to brew automatically, one of the few things in his life that did what it was supposed to. He didn't even like thinking about mornings without coffee. There was something almost ritualistic about it. Reliable. Grounding. By 7 a.m. he'd changed into his usual swimwear, a pair of black trunks and an old grey t-shirt faded with years of salt water and sun. From the airing cupboard, he took a small clean towel and stuffed it into his bag alongside a water bottle, his phone and his wallet, pausing a moment with it in hand. He'd need diesel later. He was always needing diesel, joggers, coat, keys, the rhythm of movement, repetition, everything in its place. He stepped outside and paused on the threshold, letting the crisp morning air slap him awake. The sky was dim and uncertain, the sun struggling to rise behind a layer of cloud. It painted the fields and hedgerows in a pale, watery light. Everything looked slightly blue. The drive to Teignmouth Beach was familiar, comforting. 5 miles of twisting single-track roads that curved between sheep-speckled fields and the bare-limbed silhouettes of trees just beginning to bud again. Hedgerows still held the greys and browns of winter, but something green stirred in their shadows. Spring was coming. He could feel it. The radio chattered in the background, a disjointed blur of headlines and pop music, but he barely heard it. His mind was already down at the beach, feeling the slap of cold waves and the exhilaration that followed. That water, his ritual, his reset. He didn't just like it, he needed it. The Strand car park was quiet, typical for this early on a Monday, only a few other cars scattered here and there. He eased the van into his usual spot, front row, facing the sea. That was important. Routine again, the same space, every time. He lingered for a moment before getting out, watching as the sunlight fractured across the waves. Gulls lifted from the pier in a flurry, startled by something unseen. A jogger moved like a metronome along the seawall. A dog walker hurled a ball into the surf. Familiar scenes, ticking by like clockwork. He changed out of his bottoms and jacket and locked the van, slipping his keys into the zip pocket of his trunks. The morning crowd was just how he liked it, plenty of life, but not yet busy. Dogs barked and leapt at the foam. Runners in high-vis pounded across the sand, breath hanging in the air. Children laughed near the pier, their coats flapping like little flags in the breeze. He nodded greetings to a few people he knew, some he recognized from the beach, others from his delivery route. They smiled back, raising coffee cups or simply nodding, their faces sleepy but familiar. That grounded him, too. He wasn't just part of a routine, he was part of a place. He took to the coastal path, the well-worn trail that wound along the southwest shoreline. It was his favourite part of the morning, and he relished it. The rhythmic pat of his flip-flops, the taste of salt in the air, the sound of waves clawing at the shingle below. Every breath felt cleaner out here, every step somehow more real. He hadn't explored far yet, just a few miles in either direction, always returning to his start. But this summer, he kept telling himself, he'd go further. Maybe all the way to Dawlish or down past Holcombe. Just keep walking, keep going. For now, he stayed within his bubble of routine, and it comforted him. Everything where it should be. The earth spinning, people walking their dogs, coffee brewing at 7, the sea, cold and constant. He didn't know then, couldn't have known, just how quickly everything could fall out of place. As Brandon arrived at the pier, he wasted no time. The sea called to him, and his body answered instinctively. No warm-up today, he was too eager. He shed his towel and flip-flops onto the same wooden bench he always used, placed with habitual precision. Towel folded neatly, flip-flops aligned beneath, water bottle beside, everything just so. A small private ritual that grounded him. Then he ran. The sand was cold and damp beneath his feet, gritty between his toes, but he didn't slow. He waded into the surf, breath catching as the water wrapped itself around his ankles, then his knees, then his waist. That first sharp jolt of cold stole his breath, an electric sting that never quite stopped being a surprise, no matter how many times he did this. But he welcomed it. It meant he was alive. It reminded him of his body, his limits, his will to push through. With a practiced motion, he ducked under the next wave. The world disappeared into blue and bubbles. Then he surfaced, gasping, hair slicked back, droplets clinging to his eyelashes. He paused, floating, heart-pounding, before beginning his swim. Northward, parallel to the shore. His strokes were measured and clean, muscle memory guiding him forward. Each pull of his arms was smooth, unhurried, just the right rhythm. His father's voice echoed faintly in his mind. "It's like riding a bike, son. You never forget." He smiled faintly at the memory, at the ghost of a presence now long gone. The ocean had always been theirs. Now it was just his. The sounds of the town faded behind him, muted laughter, barking dogs, the soft rise and fall of morning chatter carried by the wind. All of it slowly dulled to nothing but the water's lullaby, the hiss of the waves brushing the shoreline. He didn't notice when it stopped completely. He reached the usual end of his swim, an isolated stretch of sand tucked between two rocky outcrops. Nobody ever came here. That's why he liked it, the stillness of it. He emerged from the water with a shiver and a shake, droplets trailing from his fingertips. The breeze raised goosebumps along his arms, as expected, and he gave an involuntary shudder. He hated this part, no towel, no cover, just skin exposed to the wind, but he always ran it off. That was the deal. He broke into a steady jog, bare feet crunching over packed sand, his wet t-shirt clinging to his chest. His breathing deepened, body heating as he moved. The sun had risen higher than he expected. The day had warmed quickly, unnaturally so, but he didn't dwell on it. Devon weather was moody, changeable. He chalked it up to that. It was only when he rounded the final bend back toward the pier that something twitched inside him, a faint flicker of wrongness. The pier was quiet, too quiet. His steps slowed. He scanned the beach, empty. No dogs bounding into the surf. No joggers weaving around others. No shrieks of laughter from children. No thudding of footsteps from the running club. Just sand, smooth and undisturbed. As though no one had ever walked there. As though he'd never seen the morning crowd at all. He turned, eyes searching for movement. There was none. The people who had smiled at him, passed him, existed with him less than an hour ago. Gone. Not just gone. Erased. As if someone had wiped the scene clean. Even the gulls had vanished. Not a single bird circled above. The air, once filled with their shrill cries, was now utterly still. A faint prickle ran up his spine. Odd, he muttered aloud, voice sounding too loud in the hush. Where is everyone? He moved toward the bench where he had left his things, toward the spot he knew it had been. But the bench wasn't there. He froze, blinking. Not just empty, gone. A jolt ran through him. His mind tried to make sense of it. Had he gotten turned around? Taken a slightly different route back? No, this was the pier, the same rusted bolts, the same dark patch on the decking. He knew this place. He'd stood here every morning for the past year, and the bench had always been here. Always. Brandon stepped forward, turning in a slow circle, eyes darting left and right, searching for it. Maybe it had been moved. But why would anyone move a fixed bench, and so quickly? He scanned the sand for footprints, any sign of activity. There were none. The first note of confusion in his chest had shifted into something else. It clutched at his ribs now. Not full panic, not yet. But something was wrong. He felt it, like pressure building behind his ears. His heart began to beat faster. He glanced up and down the beach again, now properly searching. Still nothing. The town, visible just beyond the car park, looked still. Unnaturally so. The buildings were frozen in place, lifeless, like a photograph. There were no cars driving past. No bus rumbling down the promenade. No clatter of plates from the cafe behind the beach wall. His mouth was suddenly dry. This isn't right, he thought. He looked back at the spot where his bench should have been. There was only sand now, smooth, wind-blown, undisturbed. "Where the hell is my stuff?" he said aloud, more sharply than he intended. His voice sounded absurd, a small thing in the vast silence that swallowed it whole. For the first time that morning, Brandon hesitated, not from cold, not from routine, but from the quiet dread blooming in the pit of his stomach. Something was off. Something had changed, and he was starting to wonder if he was still in the world he'd woken up in. Brandon frowned and slowed his steps, a tightness forming at the base of his neck. Something was wrong. Not just quiet, off. He paused beside the pier, scanning the length of the beach on the other side, half expecting to find the missing crowd gathered there, pulled away by some sudden attraction, an emergency, a whale sighting, a film crew, anything that would explain why everyone had vanished. But there was nothing. Just sand, just sea, just silence. His frown deepened. The pier itself looked tired, neglected even. Boards that had always looked weathered but well-maintained now seemed warped, greyer than he remembered. Bolts rusted, paint peeling. That couldn't be right. He would have noticed. He always noticed things like that, small changes, new signs, broken planks. He made a habit of it. Brandon turned toward the promenade, his gaze flicking across the row of beach shops and cafes. Every one of them was closed, shuttered, their facades faded and flaking. Signs hung askew or sun-bleached to pale imitations of themselves. Windows darkened and dusty. It was like staring into a memory of the place, some decaying version that had been left to rot. A faint unease began to bloom in his chest. He checked his watch. 10:09 a.m. He blinked. It was later than he thought, but still well within the hours the town should be alive with activity. This was Teignmouth, for God's sake. Even in March, even on a slow day, the promenade would be stirring by now. Coffee shops full of regulars, tourists wandering with cameras, locals with dogs and pushchairs and takeaway cups. Life. But the only thing that moved now was the sea breeze, curling in the silence like a whisper through abandoned rooms. His eyes shifted to the Strand car park, and his heart stopped. His van was gone. He blinked again, squinting as if the sunlight had tricked his eyes. But no, where his familiar white livery van had been parked just an hour ago was now nothing but empty tarmac. Not just empty, wrong. The car park had been half full when he arrived. He remembered the blue hatchback to his right, the silver estate on his left. He remembered the man checking his tyre pressure 2 rows over. Now, only 4 vehicles remained, and even they looked ancient. Rusted-out shells, gutted and grimy. One had no windows. Another had ivy climbing up a cracked windscreen like a slow infestation. They weren't just abandoned. They looked like they'd been abandoned years ago. A chill spread through him, deeper than the cold of the sea. His stomach twisted. He walked slowly to the exact spot where his van had been, stared down at it, willed it to reappear. It didn't. His van, his bag, his wallet, his phone, his towel, everything, gone. He turned in a slow circle, heart thudding now, chest tightening with each breath. "No," he said under his breath. No, this doesn't make any sense." The words did nothing. The empty air didn't care. He sat down on the ground where his van should have been, not even feeling the grit beneath him. His breathing quickened, his hands trembled. Then, as if the weight of confusion and rising dread had finally breached the dam, something inside him cracked. He let out a sharp, broken sob. The sound startled him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Years, maybe decades. But now tears came hot and fast, sliding down his salt-streaked face, mingling with the cold seawater drying on his skin. His shoulders heaved. He tried to stop, but he couldn't. The shock, the wrongness of it all, pushed past reason and into something primal. "What the hell?" he gasped, dragging a trembling hand through his wet hair. What do I do? What do I do?" He stood suddenly, spinning in a full circle again, this time faster, more frantic. The landscape around him blurred in motion, too still, too quiet. No voices, no engines, no movement. No sounds, but the distant breaking of waves and the erratic thump of his heartbeat in his ears. It was like being stuck in the negative space of a dream. A nightmare without a clear edge. He staggered out of the car park and into the town centre, feet moving without thought. Every shop he passed was closed. Their signs, once bright and bold, were faded, cracked. The lettering flaking off like peeling skin. Posters in the windows were yellowed with age. Some fluttered, edges curled, brittle as leaves. He stepped closer to a cafe he knew well, Bella Bean, where the owner always wore red lipstick and called him Love. He pressed his forehead against the glass, cupping his hands around his eyes to block the glare. His breath fogged the pain, but through it he could just make out the tables and chairs, all neatly in place, but coated in dust. A thick, unbroken film. A coffee cup lay on its side on the counter, a brown stain congealed beneath it like dried blood. No lights, no hum of fridges, no life. Brandon stumbled back from the window as if it had pushed him away. Wind caught a scrap of rubbish and sent it skittering down the pavement. A faded, crisp packet bounced and rolled and twisted in the air, then vanished around a corner. The town was dead. Not sleeping. Not empty. Dead. And he was alone in it. He stumbled back from the cafe window, pulse hammering beneath his skin. The town was wrong. So utterly, fundamentally wrong. This was March, the beginning of tourist season. Teignmouth should be teeming with life. Delivery vans should be blocking junctions. Elderly locals should be arguing over tables outside bakeries. He should have had to dodge a child on a scooter by now. But there was no one. Just stillness. Just him. The silence stretched like elastic, tight, strained, unnatural. Brandon pressed a hand to his chest. His heart was pounding far too fast. His breathing came in short, sharp bursts. He backed away from the cafe and tried the door. Locked. He turned and ran to the next shop, then another, yanking handles, banging on windows. All of them locked, shut, forgotten. Time hadn't just stopped here. It had curdled. His fists trembled as they struck the glass of a chemist's door, the thump echoing louder than it should have. There was no response. Of course there wasn't. "Where is everyone?" he shouted, his voice raw and cracking, swallowed instantly by the heavy, airless quiet. His head spun with questions he couldn't answer. Where had they gone? When had they gone? Why hadn't he seen them leave? Was there some kind of emergency, an evacuation, a disaster, something he had somehow missed while swimming? But there'd been no noise, no sirens, no shouts, no commotion, just disappearance. He pictured his van, his wallet, his phone, his clothes, all gone. All of it had been there. He knew it had. He wasn't dreaming. He couldn't be. He looked down at himself, just a pair of damp swimming trunks and a faded t-shirt clinging to his chest. His feet were bare. His skin was already beginning to feel cold again. He had no way to contact anyone, no way to get home except by walking, miles of country lanes in this. Dressed like this, it was laughable, except nothing about this was funny. A fresh wave of nausea surged up from his stomach. He felt exposed, not just physically but existentially, as if the world had turned its face away from him and left him standing alone under an empty sky. He made his way back to the beach, scanning every corner, every bench, every shadow for another person, for someone. But it was the same, quiet, still, deserted. The tide had crept higher while he'd been gone, erasing any footprints that might have remained. The waves lapped at the shore with maddening calm, the kind of day that should have been perfect, if only it weren't so wrong. He stared out at the sea, arms folded tight across his chest, mind reeling. Was this a nightmare? Was he dead, trapped in some kind of purgatory, or was it something worse? He thought of those old black and white horror films his dad used to watch, grainy apocalypses where time broke down or entire cities vanished without explanation. Those had always felt ridiculous. Now they didn't. This feels like one of them, he thought. Except I'm not watching it. I'm in it. The wind stirred his hair, but otherwise nothing moved. Not even the gulls had come back. With no other idea what to do, Brandon turned and trudged back toward the car park. He didn't know why. He'd seen everything there was to see, but part of him clung to the hope that maybe he'd missed something. Maybe there was a clue, a sign, anything. He passed a rusted bicycle chained to a post, its tires long deflated, vines coiling through its spokes. That hadn't been there before. Had it? The car park was just as empty as before, and yet somehow even more lifeless. The rusted vehicles still sat like fossilized insects, their paint sun-bleached and flaking. But as he moved through them, something caught his eye, a movement, a flicker, paper. Something was flapping in the breeze, caught in one of the ruined cars. His heart jumped. He approached the rust heap cautiously, every footstep crunching against gravel. The car's door was gone. The inside gutted, half-eaten by time, and from what remained of the glove box something jutted, a leaflet, curled and yellowed, fluttering gently. He knelt down, brushing grime away with his fingertips, careful not to tear it. The paper crackled like dried leaves, faded ink barely legible. It was a flyer, a local one. Teignmouth Spring Fair, April 7th, 2085. Brandon blinked. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. 2085, his heart thudded in his ears. No, he whispered. He stared again. The numbers didn't change. 2085. That wasn't just a misprint. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Wasn't it? His throat tightened, the air catching before it reached his lungs. He stood abruptly, staggering back from the car, arms stiff at his sides. 60 years, that's 60 years from now. His thoughts spun, his eyes darted from the leaflet to the street, then up to the sky as if searching for some celestial explanation. "Is this a joke?" he muttered. "A prank? Some kind of messed up. But who would pull a prank like this? On him?" His hands curled into fists. He pinched his forearm hard, winced. That pain was real, too real. But so was this. The leaflet rustled again behind him, a whisper from the future, and Brandon felt something shift inside him. This wasn't a prank. This was something else. And for the first time, a terrible question took hold of him. What if I haven't just lost time? What if time has left me behind? He retreated, heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped animal. None of this was right, not even close. It was March, early spring in Teignmouth. A town that should have been stretching awake with life. The first trickle of tourists, the rattle of delivery vans, pensioners sipping tea on the promenade. There should have been movement, people, noise. But there was nothing, just silence, just him. He tried the cafe door again futilely, as if this time it might change its mind, locked, unmoving. He jogged to the next shop, same result, then the next. Every door sealed, every window dark, every building shut down like it had given up, like it had been that way for years. His frustration flared. Panic gnawed at his edges. Where is everyone? What happened? Why am I alone? The questions twisted like a knife in his gut, over and over, grinding deeper into his thoughts. He clenched his jaw. He wanted to scream. He wanted to wake up. He had nothing now but bare feet, a damp shirt and swim trunks clinging coldly to his skin. And that realization made his stomach churn. He headed back to the beach, casting desperate glances in every direction, praying for a glimpse of someone, anyone. But there was nothing but empty coastline and endless tide. The waves rolled in gently, taunting him with their calm indifference. He stopped at the water's edge, stared out at the horizon, tried to anchor himself in something, anything, that made sense. But there was no logic here, no reason. Just a slow, creeping horror. Brandon turned in place, the silence closing in again, more suffocating than before. His gaze swept over the ruins of a town he thought he knew, over windows like dead eyes, over streets that no longer remembered their names. Then his jaw clenched, fists trembling at his sides. His mind gave up trying to explain it. All that was left was one simple, brutal truth. He had no answers, no one to ask, no clue what had happened, and no idea what the hell he was supposed to do next. He stood there, breathless in the still air, eyes wide and unblinking, as the question finally surfaced, loud, sharp, desperate. What now?
This was Lost Time, written by Beryl Coops. I hope you enjoyed my short story. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. I have written over 500 short stories over the years under many pen names. I will be updating these and recording them under the Beryl Coops name. I will be listing them on YouTube as fast as we can get them recorded. They will include historical drama, humor, adventure, romance, period drama, mystery, thriller, war stories, spy stories, revenge, horror, psychological horror, dystopian, disaster, children's stories, love stories, and more. Too many to name. Something for everyone. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up. It helps others find my channel. Until next time, thank you for listening to the end.